Howdy and welcome to making a sheath for this axe. So I'm working in the shop today, and while I'm waiting for some other stuff to dry up and finish up, I figured I'd come over to the leather working side of things and go ahead and create a sheath for this. Guess I don't need this on. This axe specifically is kind of special to me because it's generations old and it's been passed through the generations in my family. So I want to make something that, one, actually protects the edge from me and protects me from the edge. But also I want to create something that looks kind of old and follows the age and the roughness of this axe. Now, I don't have the most leatherworking experience, okay? There's people out there that are far more talented. But I figured I'd show you some of the sheaths I've made for knives because I've never made a sheath for an axe. This is a buckskin sheath. Okay, this is a sheath for a 18th century style knife. Okay, just a very simple knife. It has a deer antler handle. But this is just buckskin. Okay, it just folds over and it's stitched up. And then we have this one. This is my personal carry knife. I made this several years ago. Nice little blade. And this is a kydex sheath that's actually wrapped with leather. And then it's got a belt loop on the back. Here we have a Bowie knife with a stacked leather sheath. I'm going to do a stacked leather sheath for the axe, so this is probably the most similar as far as construction to what we're going to do here. But this is a very tight sheath. The knife slides out pretty tight, just like that. Okay, good size Bowie knife, good size sheath. And then we have a more decorative style. This is based off of a Native American Cree dagger, what's called a chief's dag. So we have trade beads here. These are just decorative beads that are all stitched on by hand. And then a buckskin sheath on the back, and then it's lined with veg tan on the inside. And again, really big knife here. Then the strap is twisted. We got twisted fringe down here. But I figured I would take the time to kind of show you guys that I've done knife sheaths, but nothing like an axe sheath. The idea I want to do for this is just do something real simple. So maybe a piece on this side, either, circular to kind of follow the profile or square, I'm not sure yet. So do that on both sides. We'll have a welt here to protect our stitching. And then honestly, I'm thinking just a little strap that goes on the back. Like I said, I've never made a sheath for an axe, so this is going to be an experiment for me, and then obviously I'll test the design out and see what I'm happy with. And knowing me, I'm sure I'll change things in the future. But I have a little bit of downtime in the shop, so I figured why not go ahead and make this thing. It's a long time coming. So with that being said, let's go ahead and get started. Alright, so the first step is to go ahead and just trace out the pattern that we're going to use for this sheath. And I've already cut out one side of the sheath, so I'm just tracing that with this pencil here onto this leather. And the leather that we're using today is a 8 to 9 ounce veg tan leather. That's what I like to use for the thicker stuff. And then here I'm just drawing a line on where the welt will be. So this is going to be a 3-piece construction here. So we're going to have one piece of leather on each side of the axe head. And then in between those layers, we're going to have a thin piece called a welt. And that's just going to protect our stitches from the edge of the axe head when we actually insert it into the sheath. The next step is to create the welt. So I've already cut it out, as you can see here. And now I'm coming in with a tool and just removing the smooth side of the leather or the hair side. And this is going to create a rough side on both sides. That way when we actually glue it up with contact cement, that contact cement is going to actually bond onto that rough side of the leather. And it's going to give us a tighter bond and it's going to be stronger altogether. And speaking of contact cement, let's go ahead and apply some. So typically on all my sheaths that I do, I like to do 2 layers of contact cement if I'm going to use contact cement. So the first layer is going to kind of penetrate the leather seep in and fill up any gaps and voids. And then that second layer that I put on that same piece is what's actually going to cause the pieces to adhere to one another. So to use contact cement, I'll go ahead and apply the first layer on both pieces. Then I'll apply another layer on both pieces. I'll let that get tacky to the touch. And then I'll go ahead and adhere those two pieces together. And then I'll use a hammer to come in and hit those pieces, hence contact and the name contact cement. And then it's set and it's good to go. I'll let that dry for a little bit longer, and then I'll go ahead and apply the contact cement to the other side of the welt and the other side of our sheath. And then I'll just repeat the same process. And then once that's dry, we can move on to the next stage. All right, we're starting to get a general idea of what everything's looking like. You can see how it's going to fit up onto the axe. Obviously the welt is too long, so we need to cut that off, and then we can move into marking out our stitch holes. Because the layers of the leather are so thick here, I'm coming in with a punch and I'm just marking where these stitch holes will be. And then I'll come back in with a drill press and actually drill those holes so we can get some thread through there and stitch this thing up. And again, the only reason I'm using a drill press here is because of how thick everything is. Okay, if I were to use an awl for this, it would be a very daunting task. Usually I don't like to use a drill press to do this because we're actually removing leather here. So when that drill goes through the leather, it's actually cutting or tearing the leather out and creating a hole, which we do want a hole, but we're removing material and we can't get that material back. So by using a punch or a stitching awl, we're actually piercing through the leather and just moving the leather aside. So when we go to put our thread in and we tighten everything up, that leather will eventually close back up on that thread and create a nice tight fit. We can still get a nice tight fit by doing it this way, but I just don't like to remove material, especially when I'm working with very thin leather, like say deer skin, for example. But anyways, we're just going to continue to use this drill press here, come in and make holes, and then we'll move on to the next step. And that next step is to go ahead and dye the leather. So for this, I'm using a chocolate brown dye, but it's extremely diluted with water. And there's really no right or wrong way to do this, in my opinion. I mean, as long as I'm getting that dye on the leather, it's going to soak in and penetrate and it'll be fine. And remember, I'm going for kind of an antique, aged look here, so I'm not really concerned about any splotchiness or inconsistencies with the dye. And you can see that there's a couple spots on the leather that are not getting that dye. They're not accepting that dye. And that's just the contact cement sticking to the outside of the leather. That's just causing the dye to not penetrate. And that's okay. Now, sometimes when I'm making a sheath for a knife, I will go ahead and stitch everything up before I dye it. But in this case, because I'm concerned about the stitches actually changing color and getting dyed themselves, I'm going to wait to stitch it up. And that's going to be one of the last things that I do. Alright, we're moving right along here. So I've gone ahead and dyed the inside of the sheath, and the next step is to come in and punch a hole on either side of the sheath, so just all the way through with that tool. And that's going to allow us to attach a lanyard to the back end of the sheath, and that's how we're going to be able to actually tie everything off and tighten everything up. Alright, so I went ahead and did a test fit with that lanyard, made sure everything was going to work properly. And I'm thinking it is, so with that being said, we can go ahead and move on and start making this thing look pretty. So I've got a 120 grit belt on the belt sander here, and I'm just going vertically with the grain of the leather. I'm just smoothing those layers out. The last thing I want is real jagged edges. It looks very unprofessional and it looks really cheap. So I'm coming in and just going to smooth all that out, and that'll make our stitch lines look a little bit better too, kind of match the edge to the stitch line that we have. And the last step on the belt sander is to actually come in and begin beveling or rounding off these edges. Now, they make specific tools for this, but I find that by doing it on a belt sander, I'm kind of burnishing it already, which is just smoothing everything down. And I am going to burnish, but this helps with that. So I'm just going to come in and very carefully start removing leather and kind of rounding everything off. And that's going to give us a much more sleek, kind of slender look. Although the sheath is actually a little bit larger than the axe head itself, by doing this kind of tricks the eye and makes it appear that the sheath is the exact same size, if not a little bit smaller than the axe head. Okie dokie, so I went ahead and burnished all the pieces, all the edges of the entire sheath. You can see how smooth they look. So now I'm just coming in with some mink oil, and this is just going to waterproof and weatherproof the leather itself. I'll do a few layers of this, but this is just the first layer. So after the first layer is done, then I'll come in and do the stitching, and then everything will be done. Well, that's pretty much it. I'm going to have to actually test this thing in the field, see if I like it. I'll probably make some changes, but you know, for now, this is good enough. I'm not entirely sure if I like this strap setup or not. I just rigged up a adjustable knot on the back there. I can just pull this to loosen it, and then it'll come right out. And then when I'm done using it, I can just put it back in, tighten everything up, and I'm good to go. So like I said, I'm not entirely sure if that's something that I'm going to stick with, but for now, it's good enough. So what do I like about it? I mean, like I said at the beginning of the video, I wasn't going for perfection, okay, just a quick little project to do. So I like the overall look and aesthetic of the leather and the sheath itself. I think it gives it a nice kind of old rugged look to match the history and the age of the axe itself. And the last thing I want to do is create something that looked brand new to go with this really old axe. What would I change? Well, if I was going to send this out to a client, I would definitely spend more time burnishing. Just make that look a little better. It looks a little rough right now. And then I would also spend extra time to make sure that my stitch lines on either side were nice and even. That just adds to the overall look and quality of the sheath itself. But other than that, I mean, I don't think I'd really change anything. It's already been waterproof, weatherproof, so it's good to go there. So overall, I mean, yeah. Quick little project, not too bad. If you guys liked the video, go ahead and hit that like button and subscribe. If you guys have any questions or comments about anything you saw in the video, feel free to put them down below. If you'd like to stay up to date on current projects and upcoming videos, feel free to check out my Instagram. It'll be linked in the description. And remember to keep your tools sharp and your mind sharper. And thanks for watching.